This is the Ger in every Parsha, Parshas Balak. I wanted to share a very, very beautiful piece of Torah with you from the Barditchever, the Levi Yitzchak of Barditchev, who was a contemporary to the Alter Rebbe, also Hasidic masters like the Shpola Zaidi, the Chozim Lublin, who were all students of the Maggid of Mezrich. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak has a sefer called Kedushas Ad Levi where he records his Hasidus, and I believe that he's the namesake of the Rebbe's father, Reb Levik. So let's get right into it. Parshas Balak. Vayigar Moav mipnei ha'am ma'od v'yikatz Moav mipnei bnei Yisrael. The beginning of the parsha starts out Yar Balak ben Sipor es kol asher asa Yisrael le'Amori, that Balak saw everything that Israel did to the Amori. Israel in the last parsha was at war with the Amorites, and they killed Sichon and Og in a war. And it says Vayagar Moav, and feared Moav mipnei ha'am, in the face of the ha'am ma'od. It was very great, this nation, ki rav hu, because it was very big, it was very large. Vayakatz Moav mipnei bnei Yisrael, and Moav was disgusted in the face of Israel. So Rabbi Levi Yitzchak in the first mimer, he says over here, he says, Nira b'mai diuch hachasuv mikodem ha'am va'achar kach b'nei Yisrael, that it seems from this, the detail that's written, that the Am is mentioned before b'nei Yisrael. In the Pasuk, it says, Vayagar Moav mipnei ha'am, and then later it says Vayakatz Moav mipnei bnei Yisrael. There's two different words, two different meanings, and also two different designations, ha'am and Yisrael. And he picks up on this. He says, V'yidua b'midrash, it's known in the midrash, it was Zohar HaKadosh, and in the Holy Zohar, da'am hu erev rav, that the nation refers to the erev rav. V'zehu v'yagar Moav mipnei ha'am ma'od. And this is that it says that Moab feared before the nation very much. Machmas ha'am erev rav, and it's because of the nation was a erev rav, pachad shirei shekol ma'od, that the fear was from seeing that Shirei Shekol Makom Yisrael Shochnim Misgairim Lehem Gerim Kamo Erev Rav Shinisgairu LeYisrael, that everywhere that the Yidden went, they were amassing converts to themselves, and that they were bringing more people into the nation, and it was starting to grow. But also remember that the erev rav, which was a great mixture, came out of Mitzrayim with the Yidden, and that mixture, it says over here that they were big, they were great, they were very great. And it says Glal Kain Pachad Shi Yavo'u B'nei Yisrael Legvulo Elu Yisgaru Muso Gam Kain Lehem, that whenever Israel would come to the borders of these nations, they would, like a vacuum, suck the converts out of these nations, and the converts would be attracted to Israel like a magnet. V'shelo tomar mai ichvas lehu, there's no reason given why they feared other than that they were great. Leze Omar Hachasu v'yikatz Moav mipnei bnei Yisrael shahaya sone ma'od Yisrael. So they saw that because everywhere Israel went, they were attracting people to them, and they were attractive people to be a part of, and they were very great, and they were successful. And so they were very scared of the enormity of the people that had joined them and the amount of converts that had joined them. And because of this, they became disgusted with themselves in the face of Israel, because they realized that Israel was going to swallow them up. And we see this in the next piece that the Rabbi Levi Yitzchak says over here, on the rest of the pasuk. Ata yechalchu hakahal es kol kulu chulchoch hashor es yerech hasadeh. So he goes on and he says that Vayomer Moav el zikne Midian ata yelachu hakahal es kol sevivo senu kilcho hashor es yerech hasadeh uvalach ben Sipor melech lemoav be'esah hev. That Moab said to the elders of Midian, now the congregation will chew up our entire surroundings as an ox chews up the greenery of the field. So the B'ditchever says, Yesh lahavin, it's necessary to understand lamazeh hamashal lashor sha'ochel yerech hasadeh. It's necessary to understand this analogy of an ox eating up the grass of the field. Yerech is a word that means like herbs or greenery. Vanira lavor, that, and the seemingly the explanation Makoidem Nevor HaPasuch. It's necessary to preface from the Pasuk in Devarim in the Shema, where it says, V'nasati eseh b'sarcha levimtecha v'yachalta v'savata, that Abishur will, after it talks about the Abishur giving the Jews rain, it says that he will provide grass for the field, for your cattle, that they should eat, and v'yachalta v'savata, and you shall eat and you should be satiated. He says, Ki Hashem Yisbarach Baruch Hu, because the name of the Holy One, blessed be He, Kalal Es Ha'adam Harishon V'achilas Es Ha'esev Hasadeh, that in the beginning Hashem gave the Esev, the grass of the field, or the herbs of the field, to man for food, like it's mentioned over there in Bereshis 3:18. Ki kol ma shahadam ochel yesh bo mitzvahs, and everything that that the man eats, there is for it a mitzvah. Ulechatzer v'shem behem mitzvahs b'shas harishon harisha lo techorish b'shor uchamor yachdav. That when you're dealing with food that's grown in the field, fruits and wheat and things like that, there's a mitzvah that you're not allowed to plow the field with a donkey and an ox, like it's mentioned in Devarim 20:10. V'chein bezriya yesh mitzvahs lo sazriya kalayim. Then when you sow the field, you're not allowed to sow mixed seed in the field. That's another mitzvah that has to do with harvesting and agriculture. V'nimsa all yedei ha-mitzvahs ma'ila ha-nitzus asher b'machal hahu v'chein b'kol ha-ma'achalim yesh behem mitzvahs. And it comes out that in everything there's a mitzvah that is to raise the sparks that are in the food, that is in all that is eaten, because everything that is eaten, there's mitzvahs in it. And so the reason there's mitzvahs is because there's nitzutzas, there's sparks of holiness that need to be elevated. Avol be'esev hasadeh enon zriya al yedei ha'adam ve'ein behem asiyas ha'mitzvahs ve'ech yochel laha'oilas oisan achilas oisan. But by the herbs of the field, man doesn't sow the herbs of the field. God says in the Shema, He says, I'm going to provide the herbs of the field for your cattle to eat. So there's no mitzvah really associated with Esav, which is poignant to this discussion. V'zehu sheklal Hashem Yisbarach Adam Harishon Shaycho Michael She'en Bo Shum Mitzvah Me'adam Shiyocho Ha'adam Al Yidei Ze Le'oila Sanitzutz Asher B'toch HaMichael. And is that it's the Holy One, blessed be He, that made it edible, and it's not there a mitzvah for the man that he should be able to raise sparks from this esev, and anything in the sparks in the esev that he eats. V'zehu haremez v'nesati esev b'sadcha levimtecha. So this is a hint to that I'm going to give you the herbs of the field for your cattle. Ki b'shehabehema achilas ha'esev ha'adam ha'ochel behema ube'emes ba'achilas ha'behema yesh ba mitzvahs shchita v'shor mitzvahs she'achilas v'shor Nimsa al yidei ze gam ha'esev yesh la aliyah. That when the ox eats the grass and the man eats the ox, and in truth, in eating the animal, there's a mitzvah because he has to do shechita, has to be shechted properly according to Torah law, and it comes out that if he eats the ox, then and he does it with the mitzvahs that are associated with eating the ox, then he's also elevating the grass that the ox ate. Vehine ha'arizal kasuv v'keneged arba yesoidos domam tzemeach chaya medaver neged zehu arba olamos atzilas Briah yitzira asiya nimsa neged chai hu Briah. So the Arizal speaks about the four foundations of the world, which are connected to the four worlds. So the four levels of godly consciousness in the world is domem, which is inanimate objects like rocks and minerals, and then there's tzemeach, which is vegetative life, and then there's chaya, which is animalistic life, and there's medaber, which is human life. And those are connected to the four worlds that's spoken about in Kabbalistic teachings, Atzilas, Briah, Yitzira, and Asiya. And it comes out that the world of the animal, the world of the ox, is the world of Briah. Vehine nefesh ha-bal tshuva, and behold, this is the soul of the Bal tshuva. Dahainu ha-gerim lehem yoser benachol la-ha-oilas hanitzutz mimai shehu tzadik min nariv. And therefore the gerim to them is a greater portion, that they are able to elevate the nitzutzis to the level of Bal Tshuva, which is higher than the level of a tzaddik. Vehine ze harasha balak chaya hu lo pachad mi Yisrael machmas shi Yisrael b'hakilasam ha'elu nitzutzos v'ze harasha haya sone ma'od l'kedusha. And it comes out that this wicked Rasha, this evil person Balak, that he was afraid of Israel because Israel he felt that he would eat these sparks, that he would take these sparks of holiness away from him, and it caused him to hate Kedusha. The word is sone, but that's also related to jealousy. So it's the hatred is because of jealousy. V'zehu haremez v'yikotza mipnei bnei Yisrael. And this is the hint to why he hated the children of Israel. Shezei kotz be'enei oiso harasha lios Yisrael. That the kates also means thorn. That this kites in his eye, this thorn in his eye, was that it caused this the Rasha to hate Yisrael. V'zehu haremez v'yigar Moav mipnei ha'amod. And this is the hinting to how he was afraid of the great nation. Ki ko makom shechasuv ha'am hu haremez al ha'erev rav ha'gerim shehi b'Yisrael. And everywhere it mentions the it's talking about the converts that join themselves to Israel. V'zehu ki rav hu, and they were very great, very big. Hainu hagerim shelo yalu oisam kanal, and therefore the gerim they joined them, like it's mentioned above. Ki haim misoglim yoser la oilas hanitzutz, and because they were able to greatly to take these sparks. V'zehu haremez kulakots hashor es yerech hasadeh. This is a hint to the idea of the ox eating up the grass. The grass was representative of the gerim who had no mitzvahs like Adam Harishon. The shore was representative of Israel. And the shore has mitzvahs that are associated to it. It has to be shechted properly. It can't plow the field with a donkey, so on and so forth. And when the shore is eaten, then the grass is elevated. And that's the whole idea of the convert kind of piggybacking on Bnei Yisrael and joining themselves to Israel. Ki haklal nefesh hagerim aliyasam od oilam habriya v'chein hu be'arba yesodos tzumeach yesh lo aliyas lechai hu neged oilam habriya. And the gerim that were elevated to the world of Briah, because that's where the gerim were in the lower world of Tzameach, which is the vegetative world. And when they were eaten by the ox, which was Israel, when they were lapped up, they were taken from the world of Tzameach and elevated to the world of Briah. And ultimately, if a Jew shechs the ox and he eats the ox, then they're elevated to the level of Medaber. And he ends off here and he says, V'zehu kilchot hashor kulu haremez aliyas oilam habriya. That this is the idea of the shore elevating to olam habriya. And there's something interesting Rashi says over here. I'm going to bring Rashi in just to add to what the Barditchever says. He says that He says over on the two words kil chok hashor, as an ox chews up, kol masha hashor melacha lachech, whatever area an ox chews up, ein ba siman bracha, has no sign of blessing in it. And it's explained over in Tanhuma 3, Rashi explains the comparison to an ox. When an ox chews from the ground, it tears out what it eats by the roots. So too did Israel annihilate its enemies, not sparing even the young children. Now, an ox eats up the grass, he tears it out by the roots, meaning that there's no chance that it can grow back. And it's uprooted from where its dirt is, where its birth is, where its home is, and it's elevated in the stomach of the ox. And this is all analogous of the convert. Because the bracha is interesting that David HaMelech has to do with the bracha. And we know David HaMelech is connected to converts. And how is he connected to converts? Because his grandmother was Rus. Balak is mentioned in the Torah. His name is enshrined in eternity in the pages of Torah, and also in the minhag of the names of the Parshiot, because he had a son named Eglon. Eglon was a fat king, and he was butchered by Ehud, and Ehud stabbed him. Ehud was a one-armed man. His other arm was lame, and Ehud stabbed him in the gut. He stabbed him so deep that the hilt of the knife sunk into his innards, and his intestines spilled out, and he died. But he stood up for Ehud, because Ehud said he had a word from God, and Ehud was a prophet. And because he stood up, it says that he merited to have Rus, and Rus was the grandmother of Mashiach. And so the reason that Balak is mentioned in the Torah is because he is mentioned because he is a progenitor of Mashiach through Rus, who was the grandmother of David. David instituted the Psalms, so he was known for his mouth. Also, David represents Malchut, which part of the Malchut is the mouth. And the in Briah, the world of Briah is known by Bina, understanding, and we know that there's 50 levels of understanding in Bina. And the brachot, we know that were instituted by David, were 100. So if you take the 50 levels of understanding in the mind, in the mind of Briah, they produce in the mouth 50 more brachot, which equals 100 brachot. And this is David, which is praising the name of God. When it was asked that Balak went to Midian and asked about Moshe, what was his power? Where was his power? They said it was in his mouth. And that is the power of Yisrael and Yaakov in Yehudah, is to praise God and to give thanks to God and to tell over the testimonies of God. This is the Ger in every Parsha. Thanks for listening. Parshas Balak.